Okay, so what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about the lead leg and the impact that that will have on your downswing, because it's an area that I haven't spoke about much recently on the channel, and it is going to make a big difference to your ability to do things like stay down, but also deliver the club with an element of sort of strike and consistency. So the problem that I tend to see with most amateur golfers is that they will want to and understand the need to trigger rotation in the downswing. So what often happens is they do things like stand up. So kind of this type of motion here. Now the main reason for this is because of this functionality of this lead leg. You see, when we look at professional golfers, and if I hit a couple of shots here, first of all, you'll notice the way that I flare my lead foot out. And then as I come in towards this hitting zone, you'll see the way the upper part of my leg starts to move towards the target. And as I swing through, it continues to move even more towards the target. So like so. Now, as I'm doing this, you see, that helps me move my chest and my pelvis through towards the target as I continue to swing my arms through. Now, for example, if this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to restrict that motion, similar to what I see with a lot of amateur golfers. I'm going to keep this lead leg forward facing, my foot forward facing, perpendicular, and I'm also going to keep it forward facing. And all of a sudden, even just doing some practice swings, I would never be able to retain hip depth, which is something that we'll come on to in this video. It sort of forces me to sort of stand up and throw my arms at it, because there's no way of continuing that sort of rotational motion. So with a lot of my online students, I kind of break stuff down, because explanations are great, but obviously the practicality of making a change isn't always quite so simple. So there's a few things that we want to do. The first thing that you want to do is you want to change your foot position. I would strongly suggest that you allow your lead foot to be much more forward facing and turned out, to the point where if you're going to hit some practice shots, you can actually exaggerate this. The reason why you can't have it excessively turned out for a normal swing is it will restrict how far back you can swing, and you'd start to get a little bit of aggravation under the knee. So you kind of got to find a happy medium where this leg can be outward facing enough where it doesn't restrict your backswing rotation. But if you're going to just do some practice impact stuff, then flare it out. It'll just make life much easier and give you that liberated feel. So what we want to do is we want to understand this leg is flared out. I'm going to sort of just put my hands across my shoulders here and just sort of demonstrate a couple of backswing movements. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is just concentrate on allowing my lower body and my chest region, so the pelvis and the chest region, to just move towards the target. And I'll let my head go as well. As I'm doing that, I've got my new foot position. I'm just going to allow the upper part of my leg to face in that direction as well. So I'm literally just moving like so. Okay. Now, first of all, for those of you that are so experienced in doing this, you'll believe how much easier this is, right? You'll feel like you're able to turn forever and ever. So that's what you'd want to do first and foremost. Now, once you've done that, what you then practice is by maybe using something like a chair. I'm going to face you guys, place it behind you or about 3 fingertips distance away, and do the same motion, but just ensure that you're not sort of standing up and that your left hip is moving back. And this gives us the ability to retain what's known as hip depth. Now, when we retain hip depth, and the important thing about understanding your hip and your hip angles is it helps you control the bottom part of the swing. So if you imagine I drew a line here to represent my swing plane, if I'm somebody who stands up, then the club is always going to be delivered more vertically. If I can learn how to rotate whilst retaining my hip depth, then the club can work much shallower at the bottom part of the swing, which is going to give us much more consistency. So that would be the second thing you want to do. Incorporate those rotational feels, that lead leg move, while simultaneously retaining your hip depth will make a big difference. Now, my last little point when it comes to this, and again, this is what I tend to try and encourage a lot of my students to do, is just make sure once you start doing things like moving your head and moving your chest, sometimes people kind of lose sight of the idea of what's known as separation. So separation basically means that what we're not looking to do in the downswing is we're not looking to turn the shoulders at the same rate of rotation as the lower body. Otherwise, this would make us sort of swing over the top and look like so. What should happen is that the lower body would work in a rotational manner as you sort of, if you like, try and keep your head still. And what this does is this produces more of a tilt. So you can see now my shoulders are more square than my lower body, as opposed to, again, if I rotate them at the same rate of rotation. I just think you need to be mindful of that. I don't stress too much about that with students. I'm quite happy for them to do things at a time, get used to the rotation, get used to the leg, and then as time goes on, start concentrating more on maybe keeping your head still, or at least keeping the orientation of your head still. See the difference between doing something like this as opposed to like this. And the reason why that's so important is, one, because I do want you all to experiment with rotational motion, but obviously what I don't want you to do is start swinging over the top, because you're moving your shoulders at the same rate as your lower body instead of more this way. And that will just come from the idea of keeping your head still as you practice those chair drills, as you practice this type of motion. And it's acceptable for your shoulders to obviously be a little open, but nothing too drastic. Now, my last little point on this video is the reason why that head position is equally so important is because it helps you produce a tilt, as I sort of mentioned there. So if I put the club through my shoulders, I open up. See the way that now, as I continue to rotate my chest and my pelvis and my lead leg towards the target, but I'm sort of concentrating on keeping my head relatively still. See the way that the club goes more upward. And the benefit of that is when you can start getting that feeling of it going more upwards, you can apply that same feeling to the longer clubs. And I think that way then, because I always get questions about people like the interpretation of rotation, but they often wonder if it can be translated to the longer clubs, and of course the answer is yes. So with the longer clubs, the temptation is to stand up to help the club move through the bottom part of the swing and hit more up on the ball. We don't want to do it that way. The way you want to hit more up on the ball is the shoulder going more back. And the way you can do that is exactly the same motion as I'm demonstrating here. So this is a key move, and this is a move that I would suggest great golfers do. Amateur golfers maybe don't possess this move quite as well, but it's something that you certainly want to be practicing. And you can evolve it. I would get used to the movement first and foremost, and then you can start doing things like shifting your weight more downward, using the ground a little bit better. But I think realistically, just get used to the functionality side of it, because that's where most amateur golfers don't do it, and they get a little lost. See you guys again really soon. Let me know how you're getting on.